Brought to us in 1990 by Activision and developed by Athena, Swordmaster on the NES is a unique side-scrolling action game in the vein of Castle of Dragon, if you guys know that one. Some would go so far as to call this game a sequel or an offshoot of Castle of Dragon, and it's not hard to understand why. They're both very similar. The story in the game is your basic brave knight needs to rescue the captured princess shtick, but hey, story's not important here. Swordmaster is a game about action, patience, and strategy. It does open with a pretty cool anime-style cutscene, but it doesn't really shed any light on the story, and is really just there to kind of give you a basic idea of what's going on. In Swordmaster, you will work your way through 7 excruciatingly tough levels on your way to rescue your captured lady from the forces of darkness. The game may seem simple at first, but after dying over and over again, you'll notice that it's a game with a pretty steep learning curve. It relies heavily on the proper usage of both the sword and the shield in order to get through most fights, and failure to do so will no doubt leave you at the continue screen a lot more than you would like. Swinging the sword is done with the B button, and jumping is done with A, just like you would expect. To use the shield, you have to position yourself to do so. This can be done by holding down a direction on the D-pad. Holding down will cause the knight to block low, while holding up will prevent you from getting popped by anything coming from overhead. You'll notice too that you have 2 meters at the top of the screen. One is your health and the other is your experience counter. The more enemies you defeat, the more the meter fills up and will eventually extend your life bar. There's also a space on the right that shows you which special items you've picked up. Speaking of which, one neat item that you'll get at the end of the second level will allow you to transform into a mage-like character that can use various magic abilities, just like Castlevania 3. I've heard that doing so makes certain fights easier, but I seem to do my best by just using the knight form throughout the entire game. Each stage in the game ends with a boss encounter, and be prepared for a ton of them. This is one of those games that recycles previous bosses as enemies on later stages, and the last few are basically just made up entirely of boss fights. Each boss has a pattern that's relatively easy to figure out with some effort, and once done, they can be dispatched pretty easily. In addition to the fighting, there are also a few stages that involve some pretty tricky platforming elements. Thing is, the jumping mechanics in this game are really weird. You can kind of fall and then jump while falling, and doing this is necessary to pass some of the later sections. Jumping normally just won't do it. I'd like to note too that if you do get a game over and start from the beginning, your experience carries over from the last game as well as your life bar. This can make things a bit easier on your second time through, though to be honest, that's still really not saying much. I have to admit, the graphics in Swordmaster are pretty damn impressive. The game could almost pass for an early generation TurboGrafx 16 title, and it's full of large, detailed characters and some really cool background scrolling effects that you just don't see in NES games very often. In my opinion, the character design in the game is really cool, and the game moves really well without much in the way of slowdown or flickering. The sound and music are also really well done. There's quite a bit in the way of little voice samples here, though the constant "yah" sound that the main character makes when swinging his sword can get a little old at times. The music, on the other hand, is really effective and memorable. Each stage has a unique theme and fits the game world wonderfully. Make no mistake, Swordmaster is a hard, frustrating, and unforgiving game. It takes a lot of trial and error to get good at, and some of the later levels can be downright masochistic. It's a pretty fun game once you get a grip on how it works. Memorizing the boss patterns also goes a long way. For the first couple of days I played Swordmaster, I couldn't even get past the second level. I could definitely see how the game's difficulty could turn off a lot of players. Is it worth picking up? Sure, if you find it for a decent price. Swordmaster is not a cheap game. The average going price for it right now is about $25 to $30 most everywhere. It's a cool game with great graphics and music despite its difficulty, and definitely worth grabbing if you find it for a price that you're comfortable with. As always, guys, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for watching and subscribing, and until next time, stay classic.